Welcome everyone to the 10th Annual California Policy Summit. We'll begin our program momentarily, but in the meantime, we'd love for you to participate in a quick word cloud poll so we can get a feel for what you all are looking forward to learning about at today's summit. To participate, please use your phones to scan the QR code on the screen or use the link we've just posted in the chat. Once you're in, please submit your ideas in response to the prompt. Describe in one word what you're most eager to gain from today's event. We'll be using this feature throughout the summit, so please leave it open on your phone or browser for your convenience. As you go ahead and submit your answers to the word cloud, I'd like to share with you all that our feedback survey will pop up in your browsers as you log off from the event. Your feedback is critical in our efforts to continually improve our events and your experience as an attendee, so please take the time to complete our quick 1-minute survey when it shows up on your screen. Most importantly, those that complete the survey will have a chance at winning 2 round-trip passes provided by Southwest Airlines. All right, I see some submissions coming in. Some folks are looking forward to learning more about equity, information on electrification, representation, policy input, more clarity, solutions to the problem. For those that are just joining us, we're doing a Sli.Do prompt here. Describe in 2 to 3 words what you're most eager to take away from the California Policy Summit. You can scan the QR code on your screen or select the link in the chat. All right, we see a lot of equity, collaborative solutions, more about our zero carbon future, belonging, bridging the divide, advocacy. These are great submissions. Our voice at the table, inspiration from green leaders. We have a great lineup of panelists later in the program. Carbon neutrality. These are great. Infrastructure improvement information. We're definitely going to be talking about infrastructure later on in the program, so keep an ear out on that. Let's see. Belonging is a reoccurring theme, voice at the table. All right, thanks for participating in our first Sli.Do prompt. We'll have a couple more opportunities for you all to engage with us later on in the program. Now it is my pleasure to introduce the CalAsian Chamber's Chief Operating Officer, Frank Louie.
Thank you, Andrea, and welcome everyone to the 10th Annual California Policy Summit. We're excited to host this year's summit in close partnership with California Forward and Small Business Majority. Building on our work and partnerships from last year, we've assembled speakers from diverse backgrounds to provide a broad perspective on what the state's clean energy transition looks like today and the barriers we still must overcome. We also will be taking a look at the State of Diverse Business in California report, a first of its kind research effort led by Director Tara Lynn Gray and funded by the California Office of Small Business Advocate, also known as CalOSBA. Produced by Beacon Economics and Small Business Majority, together with the California African American, Hispanic, and Asian Pacific Chambers, and dozens of other partners up and down the state, for the first time, we now have a better understanding of the economic, fiscal, and social impact of diverse small firms across the state. We want to offer a huge thank you to Director Tara Lynn Gray for making this new report possible. It is important we highlight this report because this new data will help shine the light on types of policies and budget investments we need to create for more equitable pathways for diverse entrepreneurs, especially as we move towards a low carbon economy. Our speakers will shed additional insight into how we can maximize and leverage this transition to create wealth building opportunities in historically underserved communities. To learn more about our speakers and guests at this summit, please refer to the digital program available in the chat. And now I'd like to turn it back over to Andrea to recognize our sponsors.
Thanks, Frank. Now I'd like to take a moment to recognize and thank our sponsors. Thank you to our gold sponsors, California Foodservice Instant Rebates Program and ExxonMobil. our silver sponsors, DoorDash, Southwest Airlines, and T-Mobile. And thank you to our outreach partners, California Association for Microenterprise Opportunity, also known as Cameo, Human Bulb, and Unite LA. Throughout the event, we'll have some fun engagements to loop you into these vital conversations we'll be having today. We aim to make this virtual session interactive, so you may have noticed that we provided a Sli.Do link that will lead you to our first prompt, which involves contributing to our word cloud. Please use your phone to scan the QR code on the screen or select the link in the chat to submit your response. You'll only need to do this once, as the page will automatically refresh for subsequent prompts. I already see some more responses here. A lot of equity, advocacy, and representation, policy input, collaborative solutions, leadership in the space, clarity for what this transition looks like, infrastructure improvement information. We're going to talk about all of this during our panel discussion later on in the program. Solutions to the problem, belonging, the just transition, what even is that? Our speakers will be talking about that later today, and having a voice at the table during this transition. Thank you, folks, for participating. Please feel free to share your thoughts, as we'd love to incorporate them into our discussions. Additionally, we have 2 Q&A sessions scheduled later in the program with Assemblymember Tim Grayson, along with our panelists. To participate, simply use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit your response and your questions. Please be aware that this session will be recorded and included in our post-event materials, along with the resources we discussed during our conversations. Thank you for joining us and participating in the first Sli.Do prompt. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our board chair, John Gutierrez, the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs from Comcast.
Thank you, Andrea. Good morning, everyone. Today, at the 10th Annual Policy Summit by the CalAsian Chamber, we talk about a very important issue: climate change and the just transition, to how all of our economic factors and businesses get into this climate change reality. I'd like each and every participant in the discussion today and listening online to think through, how do we accomplish this in big ways and small ways? Together, we can make sure that not only we address climate change in California, but we allow all participants of our economy to take advantage of this economic frontier that's in front of us. So as you go through the day, participate in the World Club, drop a question or comment in chat, and really engage. I think at the end of the day, you will walk away with an experience that gives us the direction of how we all move forward together. As I conclude this welcome remarks, I want to add my thanks on behalf of the CalAsian Board of Directors to California Forward and the Small Business Majority for partnering with the CalAsian Chamber today to address this very important public policy issue. Thank you again, and enjoy the summit.
Thank you, John. Appreciate your leadership and your partnership in today's event and throughout the year-round work. My name is Ish Herrera. I'm the interim CEO for California Forward. We, along with CalAsian Chamber and the Small Business Majority, are proud partners of today's 10th annual event. Special congratulations to CalAsian Chamber on reaching this milestone. California Forward, as many of you may know, is a 501c3 statewide organization that really aims to bring together across communities, across regions, across interest groups, and like we're seeing here today, across sectors, to make improvements to the way that government functions in our state, and also to help facilitate the creation of inclusive, sustainable growth for all regions of California and all people who call our great state home. Many of you had the opportunity to attend our recent California Economic Summit, our 12th edition of our flagship event, where we had over 900 people on site in Indian Wells in the Coachella Valley, where we came together to begin planning the economic agenda and our collective action for the coming year in 2024. Many of you, along with hundreds of others, gathered in various working sessions that included, among others, a session dedicated to entrepreneurship and small business ownership, particularly by women and people of color. That is a work group that is influencing a lot of the thinking about how our collective action can be leveraged to continue to provide an ecosystem that is supportive of entrepreneurs and small business owners throughout California, especially as we venture into this conversation of energy solutions and energy transition and resiliency for California. I want to thank all of our work group co-leads, but in particular, Pat Fonkashita from CalAsian Chamber and Jocelyn Cuesta from the Small Business Majority, as well as Director Lynn Gray, who has been referenced already for their work in helping us unveil the report that was featured earlier by Frank. That is something that we were very happy to see roll out at our summit, and we thank all of them for the role that they played in that. As we jump into today's discussion, I think it's important and incumbent upon all of us to really monitor and help support the growth of small businesses, particularly those who are doing their work in disadvantaged communities, to really help foster that economic diversity and bridge those existing economic and fiscal and social gaps that still persist here in California despite our prosperity, and really making sure that the accessibility and the availability of detailed data on minority-owned businesses is part of the crucial conversation that needs to happen to really help us evaluate policies, make informed decisions around funding, provide them the necessary resources to potential entrepreneurs and folks who are getting ready to take that bold leap to start their own venture. And so, making sure that we hear from all of you today will be part of that important ingredient that we're all taking into account the nuances that affect every corner of California. So with that, I want to end my comments and just again congratulate CalAsian Chamber for their 10th anniversary on this event. Thank our partners, and now I have the pleasure of turning it over to friend and partner Bianca Blomquist, who's here on behalf of Small Business Majority. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Ish. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Andrea, Pat, Frank, Tyler, the team at CalAsian for hosting today's policy summit and for inviting Small Business Majority to participate. This is always a really exciting time of year. So I really appreciate having us on. Ish, it was wonderful to see you and many others that are participating on today's webinar at the California Economic Summit in Palm Springs, and I look forward to seeing everyone again next year. A little bit about Small Business Majority for anyone on the call that isn't aware, and a friendly reminder for those that are. Small Business Majority is a national nonprofit organization. We empower America's diverse entrepreneurs, and we believe that small business owners have and deserve every tool they need to invest in their business, invest in themselves, and invest in their employees. Our network consists of approximately 85,000 small business owners nationwide, and the average size of a business in our network actually has 4 employees. So what this means is these are the small business owners that typically lack access to sophisticated legal expertise, to sophisticated business advising. And so we believe it's our job to work with all of you and our partners to connect them to those free and low-cost resources that already exist in their community. And on the policy side, we believe that there is an authentic voice for small business that exists in public policy. It's just vastly underrepresented by larger business voices. Again, we know small business owners care about their employees. They want to have the capital to invest back in their business, to grow their business, and to build wealth in their communities. So we look forward to working with CalAsian Chamber and all of you to advance a policy agenda that does those things in 2024. And I also want to give a huge shout out to CalAsian and the members for participating in this last legislative session and supporting some of our efforts, including continuing to require APR disclosure for all commercial financing products, which is a cornerstone of transparency and lending for small business owners in California. So thank you again for having me, and I look forward to working with you all at the end of this year and in the new year.
Thank you, Bianca. Next, I'm happy to welcome Keegan Sullivan, who is here to provide some remarks on behalf of our sponsor, California Foodservice Instant Rebates Program, as well as introduce our keynote speaker of the day. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Keegan Sullivan.
Hi, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate it. My name is Keegan Sullivan, and I'm here on behalf of the California Foodservice Instant Rebates team. The energy transition is crucial for our environment and our economy. but it cannot exclude small businesses. I'm happy to be here today representing a great resource for business owners that will help in that energy transition. The California Foodservice Instant Rebates Program is a statewide program that provides point-of-sale rebates on high-efficiency food service equipment. Rebates range from $50 to $100 off of a refrigerator to $900 off a high-efficiency fryer to even $3,000 on some equipment. The rebates are available to any commercial food service spaces in qualifying zip codes, which includes most of the state. There's no paperwork for business owners. The instant rebate is applied as a discount directly on your invoice when you purchase qualifying high efficiency equipment from one of our participating dealers. And we work with dealers throughout the state. To see the list of qualifying products, our participating dealers and eligible zip codes, please visit CAEnergywise.com. And I will provide some of that information in the chat for everybody. There you can find all the information you need about how to get yourself a rebate, how to get other folks rebates, as well as information on monthly seminars about energy and the food service industry. And something I'm very proud of with our program, we sponsor equity-based events like this one throughout the year. This year alone, we sponsored events in Fresno, Bakersfield, Los Angeles, and San Francisco to increase our program's equitable reach. And next year, we have even more on the docket coming up. These events are equity focused and always are partnered with a community-based organization, letting them take the lead to ensure that we have a meaningful impact where we're working. Our team is committed to making sure everyone has access to affordable energy-saving food service equipment for their businesses. If you want to learn more about this program, the California Foodservice Instant Rebates Program, you can see our website, which is CAEnergywise.com, or email me, and I will, like I said, include that information in the chat. I appreciate the time. I'll put my contact information out there, and I'm excited to introduce our keynote speaker. Assemblymember Tim Grayson assumed office in the California Assembly in November 2016, representing the 15th Assembly District. Throughout his tenure, Assembly Grayson has been dedicated to addressing some of California's most pressing issues. He has championed initiatives aimed at resolving California's housing and transportation crises, increasing our budget reserves and access to higher education, mitigating human trafficking, minimizing the risk of wildfires, and helping individuals with special needs. Notably, Assemblymember Grayson's dedication to these causes has led to the successful passage of 40 bills, with one of the most recent being Assembly Bill 1198, called Go Biz Energy Unit Equity. Introduced on February 16th, 2023, this legislation, formerly known as Equity and Energy Task Force, aims to ensure California's transition to a low-carbon economy is equitable for small and minority-owned businesses in our state. He's going to provide further insights into this during his presentation today. Please join me in welcoming Assemblymember Tim Grayson.
Well, thank you so much for those kind words, Keegan. I greatly appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. I am so honored and humbled to have this opportunity to join you today. Thank you so very, very much, especially to CalAsian Chamber and to join CalAsian Chamber's 10th Annual California Policy Summit. I'm truly honored to be here today to discuss the state's transition to clean energy and how we can continue to support and uplift our marginalized and underserved communities. California has been and continues to be a global leader on climate change policy with goals of achieving carbon neutrality. Our state's commitment to environmental sustainability and reducing carbon emissions continues to serve as an example to other states in our nation, but also globally. With our ever-increasing reliance on renewable energy sources, electric vehicles, and even energy-efficient technologies, we are well on our way to becoming a low-carbon economy. But this transition is not without its challenges, and ensuring diversity, equity, and inclusion, aka DEI, are at the forefront of our efforts is crucial. Historically, underserved communities have borne the brunt of environmental injustices, and they've done so for far too long. It is imperative that we ensure that these communities are included in these important conversations surrounding our clean energy future. Our state's diversity is, you could say, one of our greatest strengths, and it should be reflected. It should be reflected in the benefits of the clean energy economy, which is why the California legislature and the governor's office has worked tirelessly with our community advocates and representatives to ensure that DEI is integrated into every aspect of our state's transition. As a result of this, our state has developed and it's created a number of programs and resources to support and uplift small businesses owned by women, minorities, disabled individuals, veterans, and other individuals from economically disadvantaged communities. But the work doesn't stop there. There are still existing gaps in ensuring equitable access to clean energy sector. This past year, I authored AB 1198, which was co-sponsored by CalAsian Chamber, the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce, and the California African American Chamber of Commerce. And despite the significant role that minority small businesses have in the clean energy transition, there remains a huge gap in minority small business enterprise participation in the market transition to a low carbon future. Now, small businesses are the backbone of our economy, and their participation is actually vital to the success of clean energy initiatives. California small businesses account for 99.8% of our state's businesses. And of those 4.1 million small businesses, 1.2 million are minority owned. An individual small business can have a relatively small carbon footprint, but the overall impact, when you look at those numbers, those emissions can be huge. So increasing the participation of small businesses in the clean energy industry is integral to the long-term success of these businesses and in California's efforts to achieve our ambitious climate goals. So policies and legislation like AB 1198, they offer support to small businesses, create opportunities for them to thrive in the green economy, and AB 1198 will identify those gaps, the existing gaps in participation, and put forward solutions to help small businesses in the market transition. It's my hope that AB 1198 will help serve or help level the playing field and empower those enterprises to be a part of the solution to climate change here as we address it in California. The bill is currently in Senate Appropriations Committee, and I do really look forward to continuing to move that bill forward as soon as we start session back up in January. So looking to the future, there are some countless opportunities ahead of us. By investing in clean energy, we're not only protecting our environment, we're also creating jobs. We're promoting economic growth and advancing technological innovation. So the clean energy sector is an industry of the future, and California is well positioned to lead the way. Now, California's progression towards a low carbon economy is not just about reducing emissions. It's really about creating a more equitable and a more sustainable future for all of our residents in the state. So that's why our legislature, working alongside the governor's office and community advocates, is committed to integrating diversity, equity, and inclusion into every aspect of this transition. Now, legislation like AB 1198, it supports the small businesses and does so by ensuring that they have stake in this green future. So with that, I do want to thank every one of you again for allowing me to be a part of this year's Policy Summit. It's truly an honor to be able to work with you all. And it's my wish, it's my hope that I am able to continue that partnership and collaboration with you all for years to come. Thank you very much. Thank you for all your work as small businesses that really lift up and hold up the great economy, the fourth largest economy in the world, California's economy. Thank you again very much.
Assemblymember, we're truly thankful for your participation here today and your strong advocacy for legislation that prioritizes the involvement of small businesses in the clean energy sector. We'll now start with audience Q&A, and I see that we have a question from Araceli here. What specifically will this bill, you reference AB 1198, offer businesses?
Well, first of all, the bill, by collecting data and gathering the resources that are available for small businesses, especially disadvantaged businesses, this bill will provide the recommendations to improve small business inclusion in the clean energy transition. The specific answer is that it looks to all current available resources, and then it provides those solutions through recommendations on how to improve on the state's resources, so that they're not being all gathered, as was previously mentioned by a speaker, by the large businesses and leaving nothing but possibly a little crumb here and there for small businesses. It really puts a hyper focus on small businesses and the resources that we as a state are providing to the small business.
Thank you, Assemblymember Grayson. And I have a few questions here as well. Is there going to be a carve-out exemption for small business owners during this transition?
I hear you loud and clear. So as of right now, I don't believe that there are any current exemptions for small business owners at this time. But as we know, policies and regulations are ever evolving. And so I highly recommend keeping up to date with state regulations and develop as they develop in the upcoming years, and really engaging with your state legislators, both Assembly and Senate.
Thank you, Assemblymember. And I have one more question here. Are there going to be fees if small business owners aren't able to go 100% electric by 2045? And how is the state regulating this?
So I hear you. As a small business owner, I share that concern. I want to say that, as was said before, policies and regulations are ever evolving. So I'm not aware of any planned fees for noncompliance by 2045, but things are happening, and every day they happen even faster and quicker. So it's really essential to stay informed about the current state of environmental policies and regulations in California, and to do so, the most accurate and up-to-date information can be, I recommend checking in with California Air Resources Board, and making sure that they know your presence, not just gleaning information from them, but actually engaging with them and asking them those questions in a way that presses them, but also lets them know what the needs are and the challenges are that small businesses are facing out on the streets.
Yeah, and that's why events like these are so important for us to get ahead and start talking about those unintended consequences as we transition to a low carbon future. Once again, thank you, Assemblymember Grayson. It's now my pleasure to introduce the moderator of our panel on boosting economic prosperity in minority communities. Let's show our warm welcome in the chat for Jessica Kim, who serves as the Chief Deputy of the Department of Economic Opportunity in the County of Los Angeles.
Thank you, Andrea. Hello, everyone. As Andrea mentioned, Jessica Kim, I'm the Chief Deputy. I'm really excited to be here today and to kick things off for our panel. Before I do that, we have another Sli.Do prompt for you all. If you haven't already, please scan the QR code on your screen that will come up in a second, or click the link in the chat. Panelists, you're also welcome to participate here too. And so it says, minority-owned small businesses are a pillar of the California economy. Yes, they are, especially as we transition to a low-carbon future, and they count for roughly what % of all businesses in the state? I'm going to give everyone a second. And the answer is 46%. As the Assemblymember mentioned, locally owned small businesses also spend more locally than non-local businesses. They generate higher local tax revenues and allow more money to remain in the local economy. Our minority-owned small businesses support 2.56 million jobs annually across California. They are critical for an inclusive, just transition as we pivot to a carbon neutral economy. Wonderful. We have one more. Our next prompt is true or false. Minority-owned small businesses are estimated to contribute $110.7 million in economic output to the California economy in a given year. So you're all submitting, and the answer is false. Minority-owned, oh, it was wonderful. Everyone did a great job. Minority-owned small businesses are estimated to contribute $192.8 billion in economic output to the California economy in a given year. That's why it's important the diverse small business community has a seat at the table during the state's clean energy transition. This highlights the significant financial impact and contribution of minority-owned small businesses to the state's economy. Again, a seat at the table. So it's not impacting them, but they are co-creating and they are at the table developing the solutions together. So now let's get into our panel. I am going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves briefly, but also to share their why this conversation is really important. And as I ask each of them to do that, I'm going to also kick off my why, which is as the daughter of immigrant parents, my mother owned a small business and had to navigate resources herself. And growing up in LA, it was hard to figure it out. And to this day, I translate everything and support my parents and all of that good work. But thinking about the outreach and especially in disinvested communities, not having things be impacted to you, but being a part of the solution, I think I sit in a place of privilege now as chief deputy of a department in LA County to oversee how we do this with our disinvested communities and to critically think through all the different components that creates wealth generation opportunities, economic mobility. And so for me, it's thinking about those who've come before me, but also thinking about my own family and my child in the future. And so a just transition is critical to have an inclusive, sustainable economy that he will enjoy, my son will enjoy as well. So with that, I will pass it over to Mark. Mark, do you mind introducing yourself and also sharing your why?
Sure. My name is Mark Douglas. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I'm the founder and CEO of High Note Technologies. We are a turnkey provider of electric vehicle charging systems, and we also install them. So my why. I got a background. I was a firefighter for 20 plus years in Oakland, California, which has its share of disadvantaged communities and social issues and whatnot. So I'm keenly aware of how well-intending policies can miss certain segments of society and the community. So with this transition to the low carbon economy or the carbon neutral economy, a lot of opportunities and a lot of economic opportunities, technological opportunities. I want to ensure that they get to the places that these policies are intended, which are to benefit everyone. So that's my why.
Love that. Thank you, Mark. Malcolm, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Jessica. Hello, everyone. Just wanted to say thank you to the CalAsian Chamber of Commerce for hosting us today. I'm excited to dive into this conversation. So hi, everyone. My name is Malcolm McFarland II. I help lead the public policy work for Lyft here on the West Coast. I've been with the company for nearly 4 years. Also had the opportunity to work on a myriad of issues across our great state, advancing social justice reform and ed policy. And so a little bit about my why. I think it's twofold. As a native California kid born in the Inland Empire in Southern California, lived all over California. I love working on California issues and helping to solve and brainstorm solutions to challenges that don't exist yet, as California is generally the tip of the spear for legislation, policy issues, for better or for worse. So I love working on first of their kind issues. And secondarily, just to be clear, making the switch to an equitable EV transition or climate policy is a matter of racial equity and environmental justice. And so the more that we can inject ourselves in these conversations, the more it'll benefit our communities. And the last thing I'll share, I just wanted to thank Mark for his work as a firefighter and helping to keeping our state safe. So thank you, Mark, and kick it back over to you, Jessica.
Thanks, Malcolm. Yes, thank you, Mark. Annette, can I pass it to you?
Thanks, Jessica. I am excited to be here with all of you today. The fact that I am representing the California Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce today, I think is a testament to how amazing this organization is in ensuring equity for small businesses across the state of California. Doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, the Asian Chamber is here to serve you. And for me personally, it gives me intrinsic value around being able to support the communities the minoritized communities that I'm from, that I interact with on a regular basis, that I want to support in the work that I do. And I just appreciate being on in this conversation with all of you.
Thank you. And Bridget.
Hi, good morning. I'm Bridget Netter, and I serve as our Senior Vice President of Programs and Talent Development here at Unite LA. And I too am excited to be in the room with all of my colleagues. Let me commend all of you for the great work that you're doing in community. My why today is access. Access is really important. Access is key to really bridging economic and education opportunities for individuals who represent historically marginalized communities. And of course, that includes small businesses. So many of our small businesses represent the diversity of our communities. And the fact that I'm here on this panel today to be able to share and lend thought partnership to the discussion is really an example of why access matters. It really matters to have access so that we do facilitate diversity of thought, but also that we're able to collaborate as diverse leaders towards solutions as we see this green economy emerge, and to really make sure that we're advocating for inclusivity and more access for others to come. And that includes future generation of innovative leaders. So it's access that brings me in the room with you all today.
Love it. And that's a great way to kick us off. Thank you all for sharing your why as well with your expertise you're going to bring to this conversation. I know that our panelists have seen the State of Diverse Businesses in California report. Hopefully the audience as well. I wanted just to jump into it. So, we look at the report and we see the insight to the State of Diverse Businesses in California and their corresponding economic, fiscal, and social impacts. How can we leverage this information as we navigate California's transition to a carbon neutral economy? And Bridget, can you kick us off with this question?
Thank you, Jessica. I mean, the report was really explicit in building out how small businesses play a pivotal role in community building and circulating revenue, driving revenue, and really actively engaging with communities. And I think as a community of advocates that really care about how California leads the way to carbon neutrality, we have to drive more collaboration through more collective impact. And really advocate for those policies and practices and partnerships and programs that translate on the ground and in reality to more equitable opportunities that specifically support small businesses here in California. Here at Unite LA, experiences teach us that policy drives systems to really implement programs and practices that impact real people in the community. And small businesses are real people in our community that are really driving real impact. So we've seen small businesses show up for students in the first year of our LA Regional Clean Tech Career Academy, and they're investing in the mentoring and the hiring of young people. We want to make sure that we're doing our part to make sure they have a seat at the table.
Annette, what do you think?
I think the report was amazing, and I do want to give a quick shout out to Tara Lynn Gray and her team at California Office of Small Business Advocate and the California Asian, African American, and Hispanic Chambers of Commerce that collaborated in driving this work from Beacon Economics. And I think the story that it tells us is that small businesses and small minority businesses are essential to California's economy. The Assemblymember mentioned it's the 4th largest in the world. We make a huge impact in our state as citizens. And what we didn't talk about is that's about $28 billion just in taxes paid by those minority small businesses. Like, it is, as Bridget mentioned, the economic engine that's driving our communities. The other thing that I think people forget, though, is that when you patronize a small business, support a small business, you're not supporting some large corporation. You're supporting your neighbor, your cousin, your neighbor's cousin, and keeping the money within your community is so important, to be able to see the impacts of those resources growing and building communities, and is just amazing to me. And I think that the data that we finally, for the first time, have actual data that demonstrates the success of small minority businesses in California. And that's going to help set our policies now and in the next 10 years.
You know, Malcolm and Mark, I'm going to ask you to comment on that too, but also maybe take it one more additional step, like based on the data and some of the insights, what are you thinking? Like, what piques your interest? What are your thoughts around developing new policies and legislation aimed at offering further support to minority-owned small businesses amidst a shift up to a carbon neutral economy? Because I know, Mark, with your work and Malcolm with yours, like as you read through the data, were there new insights that give you new thought as you all think through this for your businesses?
I'll jump in, Malcolm. So I thought the report was really good at quantifying the situation in regards to minority businesses. I grew up in it, so I was kind of unconsciously aware of it, but it was nice to see something that kind of, in a nice, tidy format, explained the situation and the value. So what I'm thinking and what I got from it is, okay, small businesses need a prominent seat at the table. So the question for me is, as I deal firsthand with small businesses, I'm selling them service, I'm selling them equipment, I'm doing all of these things. How do I give feedback when I come across a gap? So this report, this information, it was valuable. It kind of makes me feel like we're headed in the right direction. I'm very interested in the tools to monitor feedback, help the state pivot, help the policymakers have good information to pivot. But that's one of the things that I got from the report.
I love that. I think it's the ongoing feedback loop. It's not a one and done moment. Absolutely. Malcolm.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. One of the components that stood out to me was the data around minority-owned small business owners. And I think about the work that I get to carry out at Lyft in terms of building and cultivating relationships with drivers on the road here in California, to not only educate them on some of Lyft's broader policy priorities, but how to ensure that their voice is at the forefront of the conversation. And the data indicated in that report is similar to some of the data is representative to some of the data we see in our driver body here in California. I believe it's about 79% of drivers in California identify and represent communities of color, and about 19% of those drivers are small business owners. And how do we take that information and create smart policy that actually represents folks that make up this place we call home in California? And I think about smart policy related to what Assemblymember Grayson was mentioning in Assembly Bill 1198. It's focused on smart policy. How do we ensure that communities of color are at the forefront of the conversation? California has lofty carbon neutrality goals by 2045, and I think we're taking the right lens and approach based off of this information and data to ensure that communities of color are at the table and at the forefront of the conversation.
Yeah, one of the thoughts for myself too is just, you know, the issues with access to capital, the issues with navigating services, the issues with language supports, trusted ambassadors, you know, all of that still exists. And then it's this major shift. I live in the South Bay. I live in Gardena. But in my neighborhood, there are a lot of auto body shops, and I consistently think about what it means for the workers to be upskilled and trained in this space to make that transition. But then what does it also mean for the body shops themselves to be able to purchase the equipment to make that? So you have a trained workforce, but you don't have the tools to actually service the cars themselves, and that access to capital. I mean, it's expensive to purchase equipment. And so when we think about just transition for our smaller businesses, I often think like it can't just be one piece of the puzzle, but it's like a holistic approach that empowers them. So when I read this report too, it spurred on thoughts around all the different like tools that are needed to support the small business community and how they receive it that may look different than other types of businesses too. And then Bridget, just any additional thoughts on the policies, things that came to your mind?
Well, I think, Jessica, you said it, like the data should really drive results, and the results should really drive more green. I mean, there's a lot of green being invested in California communities, and we want to make sure that, we turn that into lots of opportunity for small businesses, particularly minority-owned enterprises. And Jessica, you just gave a really clear example of what that looks like, or what that should look like on the ground as we transition to more alternative fuels. Like, what does this look like for the upskilling and training of workers that are really critical to the success of small businesses? So I think it's important for policymakers to ensure that legislation like AB 1198 is enacted to support economies where entrepreneurs and small businesses have access to the capital, to new equipment, technology, training, upskilling, all of those things that are really critical to sustain and grow their businesses as we shift to more alternative clean energy solutions. So we know small businesses bring the innovation needed to meet this transition. We want to make sure that the funding, the green, really shows up in communities where it's needed.
I agree with Bridget that getting 1198 over the finish line to signature is really important. I think though, as we look at future policies, one of the biggest areas is that on the workforce development side, that we haven't been able to touch on. You really can't have one without the other, but it's a delicate dance, right? You don't want to start the workforce development and training before the businesses are ready, right? So it's a very fine dance, but there's huge opportunities. Those auto body shops in your community, Jessica, that are going to need to be retrained, so those mechanics to work on electric vehicles. It's in doing some of the work at the chamber this past year, I have been continually surprised that California is plunging headlong into this zero carbon future, completely supported. I was in the environmental industry before it was even a thing, but there isn't the infrastructure to support it, right? Not only do we not have enough EV charging stations to support this vast state that we have, we don't have companies and businesses to service those charging stations, right? It needs to be as ubiquitous as being able to go and buy gas. We haven't been able to decide on what type of charging station we should have, what kind of nozzle we should have. I can go anywhere. I can stop at any gas station and buy gas. I should be able to do the exact same thing in the zero carbon electrified future. And those are the really tough policy decisions and conversations that we need to start having yesterday.
I like that. And that's the perfect segue into resources and workforce development. I'd open it up, just building on what Annette shared. What are you seeing up and down the state? We know that folks are doing this clean energy transition, but what is that transition that you're seeing currently look like? And what should it look like? I think Annette gave a great example of what it should look like, especially from an equity perspective. Maybe Mark, can I toss it to you?
So what I'm seeing is basically people are generally aware of it. They know they're going to need to do it, but they don't know how to access it or how to get the information to make a good decision in implementing it. As Annette spoke to, standards, consistent standards, consistent charging plugs, and consistent charging levels, vehicle manufacturing, all of these things. There's a lot of confusion. And so, yeah, just a place where people can get good information and make good decisions would be great. But the thing that I come across most as a barrier is funding. For small businesses who want to do something as simple as install a charger, yeah, we got rebate programs, but they run out of money because the big companies go in and tie up all the locations for that. So we look for other sources. Okay, there's a grant over here. Well, you can't access that grant until you spend $5,000 to get your drawings and your engineering drawings done and get the utility side drawings done. So for a small business with 4 employees to spend $5,000 for a chance to get a grant is not something that's going to be, it's a hard sell, I'll put it that way. So some of these types of policies, some of these type of implementations create gaps with no current way of giving feedback to say, hey, we got this policy, it's missing right here. What can we do to adjust or pivot on that?
I think, Mark, you bring up a great point as we think, and Annette, it kind of builds on yours too, as we think about scale and, scale and strategy, like the scale strategy, right? So as we think about just transition jobs, to Annette's point, like timing is important for some of these jobs, right? We don't want to oversaturate the market with talent, but we also want to make sure people are prepared so that they're at the front of the line, right? For these opportunities, they're not left behind. As we think about scaling strategies, we know employers need to be a part of the solution to help us reverse engineer these opportunities to truly understand the skill sets and the opportunities. Like, what are some of the winning strategies that you all are seeing that you think, should be considered for policy as it relates to workforce? And maybe Malcolm, can I ask you to weigh in a little, because I know Lyft has been thinking through some of these things as you think about your own workforce.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And just for context, transportation is the biggest cause in California of carbon emission, and rideshare is a big part of that conversation. So Lyft, we're fervently working to lower our emissions. So 3 years ago, Lyft made a commitment to reach 100% electric vehicles by the end of 2030 on the road, and Lyft feels this is an important goal, and it's all encompassing. And we feel that rideshare is at the tip of the spear of EV adoption. But in order to achieve this goal, to your point, Jessica, we think about we've identified 2 primary barriers to adoption and helping to break down some of those barriers, which are upfront cost, specifically for communities of color, and infrastructure. People think about purchasing the EV, but to Annette's point is how do you charge the dang thing? So Lyft, from the upfront cost perspective, we rolled out new incentives for drivers while they're on the platform, educating drivers. So that's our first priority, is education and outreach, with 2 drivers on existing kind of federal and state programs that would help reduce that upfront cost. For the drivers that that are on the road currently, these tax rebates, they're helpful, but again, that's on the back end. How do we support drivers on the front, or how do we support folks on the front end and making that switch? And then secondarily is this infrastructure component. So we talk about advocating for smart policy, right? EV chargers, the ubiquity, to Annette's point, but currently they're in affluent communities, downtown corridors, places where folks don't actually live. And so that's priority 2 for us, is ensuring that the ubiquity of EV infrastructure is in communities where people actually live, and that do support communities of color who are some of the most help making this transition as well. So that's what Lyft is focusing on primarily at this juncture, related to electrification and carbon neutrality.
Yeah, I think through broadband and the issues that, COVID magnified, and it became clear there are areas that lack broadband access that I think folks knew, right? I don't think it was a surprise for the communities who didn't have access to broadband. I think it's an opportunity for us not to build a system where we're repeating that same cycle with our infrastructure as we think about like electric vehicle charging stations and other policies too. Absolutely.
I think, Jessica, if I could just add to Malcolm's comment, we haven't talked about the rural communities, which are just as disadvantaged and disinvested as some of our minoritized communities in this state. So that's a whole nother host of challenges that come into play in that space. But I think there is the policy advocacy piece as it relates to workforce development. And we need to do some market analysis and forecasting on the workforce side, just like we did with the small business report. We need to do the same thing on the workforce side. There's got to be some common skill sets that we could train people for, regardless of what area of the green economy they chose to work in, right? And that those skills would be transferable from electric mobility to wind turbines and solar and everything in between, right? There's got to be some common place to start. And that's really the work that we should be doing today. And that I would love to see some policy and some funding from the state to help move us forward in that direction.
Appreciate that. It's similar to our veterans transitioning. There are very good models out there to piggyback off of. Well, let's dive a little bit deeper. I wanted to, Malcolm, let me start with you. I wanted to just dig a little. You mentioned how Lyft has responded to the state's transition to a low carbon economy. Can you describe it a little bit more and like what resources are you making available to drivers too?
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. And again, the two barriers to EV adoption that we see are upfront cost and infrastructure. So on the driver side, we've rolled out a suite of incentives. But again, our first job is to outreach to drivers and educate them. And so firstly, we've launched a new educational website for drivers, which will help them, understand if switching to an EV is right for them, and then the benefits of driving those EVs with Lyft. We've also partnered with Rewiring America to join this education coalition, and reach drivers and riders, about information around rebates and tax incentives. And secondarily, kind of on the platform specifically, we have a new earnings incentive. So drivers in California will be able to make an extra $150 every week if they hit a certain ride threshold. Again, home charging discounts. So drivers can access a Lyft specific discount for home chargers in a partnership with Wallbox. Fast charging discounts, where chargers are available. And then lastly, kind of a cashback component for drivers where, they're able to use their Lyft debit card to charge, and then they get money right back in their pocket. And so I think the name of the game for us is ensuring that drivers are informed, educated, but also how do we ensure that upfront cost barrier is mitigated, and we're addressing issues related to infrastructure. And the last thing I'll share is one of the things we've learned through our data kind of in terms of electrification on the road, there's about 10% EVs on the road on the Lyft platform here in California, but we've seen that when riders take a ride in an EV, they're about 38% more likely to want to purchase an EV. And so again, it's the more ubiquity, more folks are seeing it and normalizing it is how we're working towards ensuring that we're hitting our 2030 goals on the platform.
It's really great to hear how you're partnering with folks, how you're leveraging other resources, but how you're also incentivizing it and putting like actual money behind it. I think that's great. What has been the response from the drivers, and are these like short-term or long-term saving costs? Like, how are you, or both?
Yeah, good question. So our response from drivers is, we know many drivers on Lyft want to make the switch to EVs, but again, we're focused on addressing the biggest barriers to entry, which is that upfront cost and access to charging. And in terms of short and long-term cost savings, the answer is both. Short term, upfront cost is the biggest hurdle. And so we're working with to advocate for policy to achieve rebates off that sticker price. Tax incentives work, but on the back end. But again, we're trying to address that upfront cost perspective or a component. In addition, from the short-term perspective, we have a ride challenge to help drivers pay for the vehicle. That puts money right back in their pocket. And then long-term component is these driver savings related to reduced cost of gas and vehicle maintenance. So to answer your questions explicitly, it's a little bit of both.
What about in areas that are disinvested or underserved that might not have the infrastructure? How is that going for your drivers who live there?
Yeah, another great question, and I'm sure some of my colleagues on the panel as well can speak to this. But again, to be clear, climate change policy and making the switch to an EV is a matter of racial equity and environmental justice. Racial equity, existing racial inequities in EV ownership mean there is more work to be done, and we can't leave communities of color behind. And so, again, the majority of our drivers on the platform here in California are folks of color, and so we're helping to overcome that upfront cost hurdle by point of sale rebates to bring down that initial cost, and ensuring that infrastructure and providing data to local governments when they're thinking about infrastructure and grants to place them in communities where our drivers live. Again, as a majority of our rides also start and end in low income neighborhoods, but they tend to get overlooked. And so that's our primary focus now is supporting local governments to ensure that infrastructure is placed in communities of color and helping to reduce that upfront cost.
Were there unintended consequences that surfaced during this transition to EVs? And if so, are there areas that you could suggest that we prioritize to focus on during this just transition?
Again, like I mentioned earlier, people often think about the vehicle purchase, but don't necessarily think about the charging the vehicle, but specifically in an equitable way. So charging locations, they're currently in highway corridors, affluent neighborhoods. And so some of those things that we're addressing, again, the two barriers that we see is that upfront cost. So we want to ensure that when we think about purchasing an EV, on the back end, there's the infrastructure component to support their decision.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Malcolm.
Jessica,
go ahead.
Sorry, really quickly. I was smiling because I think two things. One is I'm old enough to remember the Yugos from like the early 80s. And what we need is the Yugo for electrical vehicles, right? Like we need something that's maybe $20,000 that will, go a couple of 100 miles, maybe not super fancy on the inside, but at least it's a point of entry for communities that have been marginalized and left out of the conversation. The other thing I think is important to understand is gas cars aren't going away. It doesn't matter what the state says. They may not be sold, but all that you're actually going to have happen is those automobile repair companies that you mentioned, Jessica, are still going to be in business because people are going to keep their gas cars going longer, right? And I have to say, I was shocked when I bought gas today at $5.50 a gallon here in November. Like that's a little problematic for me. And when we have a regressive tax that's like those that are added to gas, it actually impacts those communities that we're trying to address, those minoritized communities that are most hard hit financially by those resources. And so as we look at those transitions, we need to ensure that not only we need a holistic solution, right? We need to continue the financial subsidies to buy electrical vehicles. We need to work with car companies to help reduce the cost of the electrical vehicles. And we also need to ensure that we're building the infrastructure in those communities, especially in communities where there's dense populations. If you've got multi-family units, where do you put the EV chargers, right? Like, what does that look like? We need to start figuring those pieces out. And one of the things that I'm proud of at the Asian Chamber is that we are actively working with businesses in our communities that are trying to solve some of those challenges that come up in their own small way. So a battery company that's come up with a new way of creating storage, long-term storage, faster storage than currently exists today, that will help reduce the cost of those electrical vehicles. And so investing in your chambers of commerce and who are in the front lines with your public policy organizations to address all of these different issues at the same time, I think is really important for all of the people participating on this call today.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think, Jessica, if you could give me a moment here to jump in. I think, aligned with the conversation is also access to education. Many of our residents and communities where we see diversity and small businesses are not aware of policies. They're not aware of the incentives. They're not aware of the programs. So the ability to bring the awareness and to make sure that our communities of color and where small businesses are really thriving have access to and they're aware of where the incentives are, where the programs exist to support the infrastructure and the building of infrastructure, but also that brings families closer to this energy transition as well, that they're aware that there is an education element too that needs to happen as well. So making sure that we're educating our communities and we're bringing those resources into communities of color is really an important part of this transition, and ensuring that we have inclusivity and that's represented, and that we're promoting opportunities where we can really advance as access, but also affordability. The state incentives, the federal incentives, families, communities really need to be aware of those, and those can be drivers to support more inclusivity in the transition towards more EV usage.
Yeah, I often think about how do we get people excited about it, right? I often say in workforce development, people find out about careers by Googling a career to understand that career, or they go to a government hosted website that has a laundry list of 50 bullet points describing the job. And these are very poor places to really motivate people and to get people excited about jobs that are in demand, that are growing, and to understand what the actual pathway is, to understand the professional associations, to see people who look like them talk about their careers from their communities that are working in there and know their local businesses in their community that have job openings and internships and all the supports around it. In LA County, we're working on a virtual America's Job Center to tackle some of those things, but I often know that it's really difficult for folks to come to one place to understand all these opportunities. And so how we present the data out to folks that doesn't bore them, that really makes them excited to be a part of it, is also a critical component. People just don't consume information the same way as people did 5 years ago or even a year ago. So I think it's another important part, which gets to the next transition around kind of some of the training programs that exist, whether for businesses or for workers. And so Bridget and Ned, I wanted to dig a little bit deeper. So Bridget, can you please share about how the LA Regional Clean Tech Career Academy was established and why Unite LA decided to develop this type of program?
Sure, happy to share, Jessica. And Unite LA really advocates for more equitable opportunities in the education and workforce development space. So this particular academy, the LA Regional Clean Tech Career Academy, was established earlier this year, but it took about a year of planning. And it was really established as a shared vision, working in partnership and in tandem with a local employer in the solar industry, inspired by the passion of Unite LA to make sure that we were driving more inclusivity and diverse representation when it comes to local talent to meet the workforce needs of this growing clean tech industry. And then also really supported by leaders in our community, including one of our board members. So we had a lead employer come to Unite LA wanting to invest seed funding to really bring proximate to young people the opportunities in the industry. And so sitting at the intersection of working with the supply side and the demand side, working with employers in the community to really understand what their respective needs are and workforce needs are in this industry, and then also working in tandem with many of our partners in the community, both in education and working with workforce agencies like our AJCCs and in partnership with the DO. This Clean Tech Academy really took flight in March of this year. And while the work began, as a strategic partnership, it continues to be driven by strategic partnerships. So the vision was, how do we bring this industry proximate to young people? And when I say young people, the Academy is focused on supporting 16 to 24-year-olds in our community with 160 hours of subsidized paid work-based learning. Thanks to our partnership with the LA County Department of Economic Opportunity to ensure that they're receiving education, they're receiving training, they're receiving access to mentoring, and most important, early work experience by working alongside businesses in the community who are on the forefront of this clean energy transition. So we've seen some promising results. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but this was really developed as a pathway forward for young people in our community to bring them proximate to the green energy economy, this green economy.
Thank you. And Annette, I know that you have Electrify Sacramento. Can you share a little bit why CalAsian Chamber decided to develop this type of workforce and business development program?
Absolutely. It was, once again, thanks to the leadership of our CEO, Pat Von Kashida, and Tara Lynn Gray from GoBiz, California Office of Small Business Advocates, who funded this pilot project to see what was needed to ensure equity for small businesses and minoritized communities in this energy transformation. And so we spent the past year doing a deep dive into some research, and then ran 2 technical assistance cohorts. We served about 90 small businesses in this space, and we gave them everything about getting access to capital, which we know is always an issue, and bridge funding for contracting, marketing, and financial planning, and that sort of thing for your business. When we envisioned developing the technical assistance, we thought we were going to be taking businesses that were just kind of thinking about the transition to electrified energy sector. And it turns out that there's quite a few minority small businesses already operating in that space who have had success and are literally just looking for capital and access to funding to be able to go to scale. And that's one of the things that we found was one of the biggest barriers in making that happen, is being able to get funding. To Mark's earlier point, funders want all of these proof of concepts, even though you may have sales, right? Like, you've already done those things, but they still want you to go through this other process that's really expensive that you can't really get funding for because you haven't proved yourself. It's that weird ongoing loop that we find ourselves in when, you can't get the job because you don't have experience, but then you can't get experience because you can't get the job. Same conversation with some of our small business partners. We've been introduced to some incredible technology that I think, as I mentioned earlier, can help solve some of these challenges that we're facing as a state in this electrification transformation. And I'm excited to say, because of the success of Electrify Sacramento, that we had our big matchmaking event at the end of September. It is actually being replicated across the state as Electrify California. And I think you'll probably get the link in the chat box. And we're looking to take the show on the road. It's funded by the U.S. Minority Business Development Administration for the next 4 years to ensure that we are able to replicate the success that we saw locally across the state and start making some tangible investments and movements in solving some of the issues that we've talked about already.
Well, congratulations. That's wonderful, wonderful news to hear.
Thank you.
And with that, as you think about policy or opportunities for policy or legislation based on this, any key takeaways or things you'd like to recommend?
Some of our funding streams like SSBCI and the iBank are all well and good and well-intentioned, but it still doesn't always solve the challenge for our minority businesses, though, in getting access to capital. Some of the lenders still have credit score benchmarks that, coming out of a pandemic and 3 years of a struggle, some businesses may or may not be able to meet, right? So how are we more flexible on what your FICO score is, as opposed to what your business can actually do, right? And how it can perform. Like, how do we help provide guarantees for those funders to be able to do that? And I think that should be a state policy effort in a broader scale. I also think that some of the requirements to install electrical vehicle chargers in public places is going to leave out a lot of minority businesses because of the bonding requirements of $2 million before you even get started, right? Like, before even you've dug a hole, as well as having to have a special certification that you can only get if you are already a journey level electrician. While I understand the reason behind those policy decisions, they will have unintended consequences in our communities of color.
Appreciate that. I just came out of a bonding meeting this morning too, so I hear you on the bonding issues. Bridget, just also, I know that your program has also had your inaugural cohort. You've had a lot of success with this. Are there key takeaways that give you thought for key policy or legislative recommendations you'd like to make?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jessica. So yes, we launched our first cohort in March of this year. We launched our second cohort in the fall of this year. We've had over 300 applicants. We have 108 participants currently enrolled. We graduated 61 students from our first cohort in June. As it relates to policy, as Annette so detailed earlier in comments, part of what we're seeing on the ground is, are we developing the right workforce with the right skills and the right competencies with access to the training programs that are needed to support this carbon neutrality, the carbon neutrality goals here for California. So from a policy perspective, there's definitely a need for more investments, and we are seeing them coming into our community colleges, more training programs that are really aligned with campuses that are driving, trainings and certifications that are needed in the industry. But we're going to need more training programs and more investment in training programs where young people can actually get that contextualized experiences. And I think for small businesses as well, we're seeing small businesses step up in our community. They have been incredible mentors and advocates and partners to us with our LA Regional Clean Tech Career Academy. However, once again, it becomes a resource issue. I need the talent, but I also need materials, and I also have other overhead expenses as a small business owner that I have to be mindful of. So I think there also needs to be, I can't say this enough, more policy driving real investments in small businesses so that they can train up, upskill, reskill their incumbent workers, and that they're able to invest in the development and the onboarding, hiring, and retaining of new talent from the community. So there definitely needs to be an investment in the small business community and the resources that are needed to train up future employees. And what we're doing through the LA Regional Clean Tech Career Academy is really working to develop that pipeline by bringing them proximate to a lot of the innovation that's taking place. But for young people who are interested in careers as well, there need to also be additional incentives and programs that really inspire them to pursue and make it affordable and accessible for them to pursue and access the training programs. And one of the lessons learned in our first year is working really intentionally with employers to understand what those trainings are and to build more of those into our academy model so that when our students graduate from the academy over their 12 weeks with us, that they're taking with them and taking into the work environment some of those certificates and hard skills, technical skills and trainings where they can really contribute to the growth of the local businesses. So lessons learned, key takeaways, we're really inspired and we're really looking forward to really continuing to support this work here in the community. And we do it, like I said, in partnership and in collaboration with so many in the community, but small businesses have really stepped up here and they've been a real asset to our team and to the youth that we serve.
Thank you, Bridget. I mean, you tee it up perfectly for Mark. Mark, I mean, as a founder and CEO of High Note Technologies and Park yourself, you know, what have you found challenging and what would be like, what resources do you wish would have been easier for you to have navigated? Bringing that perspective as you're doing this work. I know, Mark, we talked before, but what type of resources do you need? What are your funding recommendations?
Well, the type of resources that are needed is pretty much what everyone on this panel has talked about: funding, workforce, access to information, feedback mechanisms, and in the absence of those things existing in a cohesive manner, I've had to learn how to do a little bit of all of them. So not an expert at any of it. I know just enough to get myself and somebody else in trouble, but it's helped me to become better at practicing my business. It's landed me with resources like the CalAsian Chamber. But I think what would be beneficial to me as a service provider is to just have places where I can actually direct potential clients or end users to, so they can educate themselves, they can access the information, they can make informed decisions, and it would make my job a lot easier.
Are there tips that you would share with folks, or thinking about your opportunity that drove you here into this sector, that you would like to share to other small businesses? Because I'm sure we have other small businesses who are listening in on this call too, that are trying to lean into this space and realize that opportunity. What would you like to say to them?
I would say get in and get in now. It's going to be an avalanche of opportunity. This transition to carbon neutral, clean energy, all of the things that are going to come with it, from the business opportunities to the career opportunities. It's like the internet coming again. So it's something that you should definitely get into and be a player if you have the opportunity.
And any policy or legislative moves that you'd want to see that you think will bridge some of the gaps?
I think it would be awesome if there were set-asides or funds or programs that are geared towards individuals that would address the upfront costs. I think that that is the biggest barrier that I come across, is spending the money that you may or may not have for a future opportunity that may or may not pay out. I'd like to see more education. How do I recoup this money? Do I get to mark up the electricity? What about carbon credits? What are the things, me as a business owner, how am I going to win if I take this plunge now? More education about the timeline. There's a lot of backup in getting materials for infrastructure. COVID caused significant delays in being able to capture the necessary electrical equipment. So the utilities are very backed up and impacted by this as well. So how do we manage people's expectations? When I tell them it's going to take 9 months to a year if you sign up now, it's like, okay, I'll get back to you.
Right.
So those types of things. And then interoperability. If I sign up with this company or with this product line, will I be able to use it when I'm driving 400 miles away from here? Or am I going to have to join another system and have yet another application or process in order to enjoy my vehicle? So those are all things that I think could be addressed from a policy standpoint that could speed up or make it a much better end user experience for these policies.
Thank you. Thank you. I see we have a question in the chat from Pat Fonkushida that says SURF funding can invest with local jurisdictions, LA County, I'm going to say Department of Economic Opportunity and LA Regional Clean Tech Career Academy to scale the program and bring needed resources. How does Unite LA bring that voice to the SURF table? Bridget?
Yeah. I think, Pat, thank you so much for your question. It is really sharing, obviously, lessons learned through our work with the LA Regional Clean Tech Career Academy. We have cultivated relationships with 45 plus employers. So there are a lot of lessons learned from those employers relative to their workforce needs, but also relative to their right now needs. So being able to provide support around priorities that are being established within the SURF community relative to the green economy and the transition to more carbon neutrality is obviously, we can bring some of the lessons learned there. Obviously, employers in the field who are directly impacted by the transition. But then more importantly, what we're seeing and where we're seeing inspiration from young people to really be solution oriented and to provide the innovation in this space. We know that young people really care about the environment, they care about their communities, they care about environmental justice, and they care about climate change. And so as much as we're able to provide guidance from an employer perspective, we're also able to provide insights as to what we're learning from the supply side, from what we're seeing, where we're seeing inspiration and where we're seeing young people really identify as areas of interest. And I will tell you, entrepreneurship continues to be like one of our entrepreneurship and construction continue to be two of our highest rated academy program models that the students react to. There is, through the academy, students have really been exposed to entrepreneurs. We partner with organizations like Lacey, as well as directly with small businesses and entrepreneurs, but they're being exposed directly to the innovation and the inspiration behind some of the solutions that small businesses are bringing to the table relative to sustainable housing and more creative solutions for housing, particularly in a community as dense as Los Angeles, to our transportation challenges and the pivot to more EV, to environmental injustice issues. So there are a lot of lessons learned, Pat, that we can obviously provide as a thought partner to the SURF community. And once again, as an advocate for education and more equitable outcomes for young people in our community, it's about how do we continue to make sure that we have the resources available to grow and sustain this academy model.
And for those who are wondering what SURF is, it's the Community Economic Resilience Fund that has been funded by the state in, I think, 13 or 14 economic regions up and down the state. And our last question came from Drake, who said, President Biden recently announced $7 billion in federal funding for hydrogen hubs, which includes a California hub. Woohoo! What impact will this have on our clean energy goals? Any thoughts from the group?
I think it just gives us another pathway, right? So there is no one clean energy solution that's going to solve everything, right? It's going to be a multifaceted, holistic solution, and hydrogen is just another one of those. I just happen to know that there's a hydrogen plant going into Lodi in Northern California, and it's going to be serving as far as the coast over in Oakland, right, in the Oakland port. So there's a lot of interest and energy already being invested into that particular technology and how it can support large and heavy equipment in ways that maybe electrification cannot.
I think it'll give us the funding to turbocharge it, which will be another alternative solution, right, which would be great. I know there's been
absolutely
and like groups working. I think there's a Southern California hub. I think there was a Northern California hub that like really put it together to get California the funding
Right.
amongst all of our California partners as well, our lead government agencies. And so I think getting the funding to make that investment here will be so more to come, I imagine, on that. All right, and let's see. Andrea, do we have more time? I know I went a little over time. Just want to be sensitive to that.
Yeah, we can wrap up, Jessica, and I can go ahead and provide closing remarks. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, thank you everyone for participating in the panel today, and I'll turn it over back to Andrea.
And thank you, Jessica, for being such an incredible moderator today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great conversation.
Thank you, Jessica, and our amazing panelists. Everyone, it has been... I'm on. Thank you, Jessica. We hope you found inspiration in the insights shared by our thoughtful speakers. If you're interested in learning more or engaging further, do not hesitate to contact us by using the information on your screen. As a reminder, you'll be redirected to our quick 1-minute feedback survey once you log off from the event. Please take a moment to share your thoughts so we can continue to make valuable content for you all in future events. Once you complete the survey, you'll have a chance at winning 2 round-trip e-passes provided by Southwest Airlines. Our team will contact you if you're the lucky winner. If you'd like to share more of your thoughts on today's panel, or you're interested in recaps of the discussions, visit our social media pages also listed on the slide. Thank you again, everyone, for participating in our discussion today. Let's continue our work in uplifting small businesses during this pivotal transition across our state. Take care.